So recently this thing has been circulating that the average Amazon seller makes minimum wage. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. First off, if I sound a little bit weird, it's because since I received this news, I was bedridden for a few days. I just couldn't believe it. So just excuse me if I haven't fully recovered from this illness of hearing this news. So first, let's understand, where does this data even come from? I mean, this doesn't come from the IRS. This doesn't come from Amazon. This doesn't come from every seller on the planet, getting together and determining this. So this came from some data that Market Pulse put together. They didn't put together the whole thing, but they do tally up the overall revenue by sellers. And that's going to be important in just a second. So this site, and I'll link it in the description, as well as I'm probably popping it up on the screen right now. This is showing how many total sellers, how many sellers over 100,000 revenue per year, how many sellers over $1 million per year, and it's giving these totals. And then what happened from there is people started to piece together, well, what is the average profit margin of an Amazon seller? And you see where this is going, basically to determine how many total sellers there are, what's the average profit margin, what's the average amount, I guess, that an Amazon seller may be selling, and therefore the average Amazon seller makes less than minimum wage. So let's all just hang up our Amazon hats and get a job at McDonald's. Now, this might not be the greatest debunking of all time. I don't have weeks to sift through every court-ordered document of all time or whatever, but I do find quite a few things wrong with this. And before I get into those, I also want to say that a lot can go wrong with Amazon. You can lose money on Amazon. You can make a lot of money on Amazon. You might break even on Amazon. You might make minimum wage on Amazon. You might make a lot more than minimum wage on Amazon. It's all possible. It's all a spectrum, and it's all happening. First problem with this really comes down to perspective, because a lot of posts that I saw in Facebook groups where, people get negative, people get fearful. This is nothing new, by the way. This is like basically every day. It's the end of the world. Amazon's exploding. You've heard me say this for years now, those of you that have been on the channel for a while, and I'm just tired of a lot of it. I just think there's so much, why all this negativity all the time? It's just like move on if you don't want to do it, okay? But what I mean is, people were citing this statistic as being horrendously negative, and I just think it's a matter of perspective. And the stat is that there are 206,000 sellers doing $100,000 per year or more. And people were saying, there's only 206,000 sellers doing $100,000 or more. And I was just like, that's kind of a lot. I mean, how many people do you know that are doing Amazon seriously? And do you not think you could be one of these 206,000? Considering you probably don't even know anyone in person that is giving this a real try? So that one just struck me as funny almost, because it's just this way of viewing the world and spinning it. It's like, well, what did you expect that number to be? 500 million sellers doing $1 million a year or more? I mean, what did people want to hear for this to be good news for Amazon? How high would the numbers have had to have been for people to be like, oh, wow, okay, now, yeah, there's clearly a lot of room there. The next thing is, look, not all sellers are sellers. I would argue most, by a long shot, of sellers on Amazon are not doing the stuff we are talking about here at all. And what I mean by that is, about 8 years ago, when I was in community college, every semester I would buy new textbooks, right? And I would buy used textbooks, and I would buy them on Amazon or eBay. And at the end of the semester, I would sell them for about the same price used on Amazon. And I did this for several years. And this was not a business, nothing, but I was an active Amazon seller, right? How much money was I making? Not much. So Market Pulse says there are about 8 million total sellers and roughly 3 million active sellers. Now, thankfully, those that were doing these calculations were only considering the active, so I can't fault them there. It's not like they were saying out of all 8 million, it was using the lower figure at the least. But the figure that we don't have, the figure that I would love to see, is of those 3 million active sellers, what is the breakdown of the business model that these people are doing? How many of them are just selling some random crap that they have around the house? How many of them are, I don't know, thrifting, selling old DVDs? How many of them are doing wholesale? How many of them are doing retail arbitrage, online arbitrage? Versus how many of them are creating their own products, building their own brands, which is what private label and all this brand building stuff is all about, which is what everybody was taking this data to mean that it's dead, when the overall seller marketplace is that only makes up a fraction of it. So clearly I don't think it's fair to call all Amazon sellers, all active sellers, the same thing. You know, people are doing different business models. People are giving this different levels of actual commitment. Probably a lot of those active sellers are not considering this a business for themselves whatsoever. It's just they're selling a few things. It's not a business. That's not a way of saying that out of 3 million people that tried Amazon FBA private label, only X number succeed. And this next one just really shows the flaws, because it's almost like they understood the last point that I just made, yet continue to badger the other point. And this is because it seems like in the data that I saw going around, the profit margin used was set at 15%. So for example, for hitting this $100,000 in sales, which is already so immensely, incredibly rare, and it's never going to happen to you. So, you're never going to hit $100,000 in sales. That if you do that, if you hit $100,000 in sales, you're only going to be making $15,000 in profit, which, do the math, is not a lot. Now, here's what I mean when I say it's almost as if that point relied on understanding the point that I made just a minute before. That's because there are different profit margins for each business model within Amazon. If you are doing a high volume wholesale business, maybe it is only 15%, maybe it's 5 or 10%. But then if you look at private label, having your own brand, 20, 30, 40, 50%, I've seen that range even at the end of the day. 20 to 30 is very typical, especially at the higher levels when you start getting a lot of other expenses going on. And again, I've seen them go higher than that, 30, 40, 50%, even at the end of the day after everything. And I'm not saying you will hit 50% or 40% or even 30% at the end of the day, but the point is it's not necessarily 15% across the board. It's 0% for some people, and it's a lot for other people. And there are averages within that average from the different business models. There's the average of wholesale, there's the average of private label, there's the average of dude selling stuff out of his garage, there's the average of me selling textbooks in 2011. And another problem with all of this is that it's looking at this through a probabilistic, statistical way, like as if you signing up to create an Amazon seller account just puts your name into a raffle of where you're going to hit in terms of revenue. And when I say that, you're probably thinking, that sounds freaking insane. And that's because it is freaking insane, because that's just not the way that the world operates. Your potential outcomes are determined by what your inputs are. So relating back to what I said, everyone is putting in different inputs to this. Some people are hiring teams and putting millions of dollars of capital into this business and making it, a real crazy high level thing. Other people are 16 years old and just selling some random games or whatever. So acting like your chances of making more than minimum wage are this or this or this or this or whatever is just crazy. And you might hear, it's, 1%. I don't even know what it said. 1% chance you'll make more than minimum wage. But that's 99% crap data, pretty much, because you don't even know what those people are putting in, or what type of business they're trying to build, how much effort they're putting in, any of these things. And here's where anyone sane, anyone that actually wants to be an entrepreneur, is just going to rip their eyeballs out and eat them themselves. And this is just the complete lack of understanding of upside and putting in risk of loss for upside. That is the difference of a job versus starting a business. So if you want absolute guaranteed minimum wage, go get a job making minimum wage. Businesses can lose you money. And it seems like this mentality going around right now with this average Amazon seller, whatever, blah, 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 it's just fear. And again, it's people that just want an absolute guarantee, and that is just not business. Like, what are people looking for here? It's crazy. Like, oh yeah, you could lose money with that. It's like, yeah, you could, because you're starting a business that could also scale. It could be something that eventually has teams of employees, something that, I don't know, sells product internationally. I mean, you're talking about starting a business. Oh yeah, but there's risks. Yeah, and your grandpa started a business by putting down a 5-year lease, taking out a loan that was like more money than he'd made in his life after being on a boat across an ocean for like 40 days just to have that chance. Like, that's risk. And did all that probably like with children while you're just like 18 years old being like, oh, I can't take a risk. Like, that's crazy. Like, isn't that the whole point of business? Isn't that the whole reason people are even looking at an opportunity like Amazon, or any of these opportunities, by the way? The whole point is that there's upside. There's no upside in minimum wage in mostly any job. Yeah, sure, people can do great going jobs. I'm not like here to crap on jobs. I'm not completely anti-job. But if you want to be able to scale and do things on your own, you're going to have to take risks and do things on your own. Things that are not necessarily guaranteed to provide you this exact income at these exact times, at these exact intervals, because that's having a job. And the chances of becoming a McDonald's employee who goes on to make $1 million a year is literally zero, where the chances of somebody who starts on Amazon may make nothing, or they might make a lot of money. And that's the difference in the risk reward profile of a minimum wage job versus starting a business like Amazon FBA. And look, I know this is a bit of a funny video, but the truth here is the people that are on the opposing side, it's not for them anyways. Like, so I'm not scaring anybody valuable away here. You know, like if this is how people are thinking, they're not ready. They're not doing it. They're just like, oh yeah, that's wrong with this. So I'm much better off with my crappy, minimum wage or whatever. It's like, okay, like whatever. Why are you even having this conversation? It doesn't make sense. And yeah, I'm not actually like, worked up about this. I just think it's funny. I just think it's an odd perspective that people even have. And, I've been saying it on my channel for years. There are definitely downsides to this business model too. There's a lot of upsides like I got into, but there's a lot of potential downsides too. And I think these problems come up only because there are people out there that only talk about the positives, only talk about the crazy successes. So then you hear the complete opposite side of the spectrum. And then what I'm trying to do here is be like, no, like let's just come back to reality. That's what I've been doing in my videos for quite a while, is I just want to give a realistic look on these things, because I don't think people should be tricked into starting a business. I think they should know exactly what they're getting into. And please do smash the like button and subscribe to this channel. Help the YouTube algorithm put this video in front of some new faces. If you are a new face, then definitely do those things, because you probably haven't yet already. Leave comments on this video. You can check out in the description, I do have a free training for Amazon FBA. You can check that out. And yeah, hope you liked this video, and see you soon.